Hello, everyone. I'm Victor Manibo, one of the senior attorneys here at Wang Law Office, and you are watching the AM show, Wang Law Office's question and answer show.
Hi, my name is Ariel. I'm the host, also a senior paralegal at Law Office. Our show is going to start every Friday at 11 a.m. EST, 8 a.m. PST.
Here at the AM show, we try to answer all of your most important and most pressing immigration questions, and we encourage you to send them over to us via our platforms like Line or YouTube or emails, and we collect them every week and talk about a specific topic. This week, we're going to talk about entry without inspection, or UE, or illegal border crossings. And, we want to talk about what it means and what are the options for people who went through this.
So, Victor, before we start today's show, can you introduce a little bit on your own background?
So for those who don't know me yet or who are tuning in for the first time maybe, my name is Victor Manibo. I am a senior attorney here at Wang Law Office. I've been with the firm for over 10 years, and I've been a lawyer for over 12 years. I graduated from Cardozo School of Law here in New York, and I'm licensed to practice in New York and New Jersey, although the firm practices immigration law all over the country. Part of my job as an immigration lawyer is immigration litigation, so I defend people from being deported by ICE. I also do a little bit of immigration applications, meaning putting together application packages for immigration agencies to help non-citizens get valid immigration status here in the country. Aside from being a lawyer, I'm also a science fiction and fantasy writer, and I recently came out with my first book. It's called The Sleepless.
What is entry without inspection?
So the short answer is this is when someone crosses the border illegally. We've heard that term before, but more specifically, this is what happens when someone who is a non-citizen from outside of the United States goes into the country, not at a designated port of entry, and without any entry documents. When a non-citizen comes into the United States, they need permission to get in, and that's what a visa is. We've talked about visas. We talk about visas all the time on this show. If you don't have a visa and you don't come into the U.S. using that visa, and you don't come into the U.S. at certain parts where people are allowed to enter the U.S., then you have entered without inspection. That's what EWI or UE means, and this is a very common immigration term.
Why is it called inspection?
So inspection is what happens when you're a non-citizen, for example, who has a visa, and you come into the country and you present that visa to an immigration officer. Usually that can only happen at designated border crossings, so land border crossings, or seaports, or our airports. When you fly in to the United States from overseas, you go in through the airport, you go through this long immigration line where you have your visa ready, right? And you have your passport ready, and you meet with an officer of Customs and Border Protection, CBP, and they ask you who you are, and you show your documents to them. This process is called inspection because they are inspecting who you are and whether you have permission to go into the country.
What could happen to me if I enter into the U.S. without inspection?
So like I said, being an EWI or a UE means you didn't go through that inspection. You didn't go through an airport or a border crossing, and you didn't present any documents, but somehow you got in. The southern border crossings from Mexico to the U.S., we hear that on the news a lot. A lot of those people are UEs because they're not going through port of entries and they're not presenting themselves to CBP officers for inspection. Now, there are a lot of consequences to that. First of all, technically, it's a crime, a federal crime, to illegally enter the United States. So there is a risk of criminal prosecution and, being sentenced criminally, being held responsible criminally. That's not, strictly enforced all the time. The more common consequence is, of course, the immigration consequence of being arrested by ICE and put in immigration proceedings, put in removal proceedings so that ICE can deport you and send you away from the United States. If you are a UE, you are removable under immigration laws because you have unlawful presence. You are not allowed to be here. and therefore you can be removed. And for a lot of people, for a lot of UEs, that's just as bad, if not worse, than prison time or being, being in jail for the criminal offense of illegal entry, because a lot of UEs have been here for a while and maybe they've created lives here and they have family here. So, you have the criminal consequences, but the immigration consequences are usually much more important. And this is what most UEs face every day.
So is visa overstay the same as EV?
No. So we talked about visa overstays in a previous episode. That just means that visa overstays are people who came in to the United States with a visa, meaning they had permission to come in here for a specific purpose, but they didn't leave after the visa expires. Now, a UE didn't go through that inspection at all, didn't have a visa at all, didn't present themselves to a CBP officer at all. So they're very different. The main similarity between the two is that they both have unlawful presence. If someone's visa expires, then they do not have lawful presence in the United States. They have unlawful presence. And at the same time, a person who is UE, they also don't have permission to be here. They also have unlawful presence. So that's the only similarity, but these two kinds of cases are very different.
So what is unlawful presence?
Yeah, I know I talked about it a little bit already, and we talked about this in a previous episode, but just as a reminder, unlawful presence is a ground of inadmissibility and removability, which means that, it means you shouldn't be here. You're unlawful in the United States. Your presence is not authorized to be in the United States. And if you have unlawful presence, if the government finds that you are inadmissible or removable for unlawful presence, you are ineligible for certain immigration benefits, and you are barred from re-entering or from entering the United States for a specific period of time. If you have unlawful presence for more than 180 days, but less than a year, there's a 3-year bar to entry for you. And if you are unlawfully present in the United States, there's a bar of 10 years. So meaning after you leave, you can't come back for 10 years. Again, we have a previous episode about this, specifically with I-601A, but it's just good to remind ourselves of what unlawful presence is, because UEs do have unlawful presence in the United States, and so they're subject to these grounds of inadmissibility or removability.
Yeah, if you think you might qualify for 601A, you should better to bring your file to consult to see if you can do anything. So if another situation, if I got arrested at the airport when trying to enter the US, am I a UE?
So some people, go through the airport, they present themselves to CBP, and they get arrested by CBP for any number of reasons. Maybe there's a problem with their paperwork. Maybe, the visa is invalid, the passport is fraudulent, or something like that. This is something that happens quite regularly. And those people who are arrested by CBP at an airport or a land border crossing, they are not UEs. So it's not the same. Because these people who are at the airport or a land border crossing, they are trying to present themselves for inspection, and they haven't been able to pass inspection. That's why they were arrested, right? So they haven't entered without inspection. They were inspected and they were denied entry. Now, if they arrest someone at the airport, they are sometimes released into the United States because they're put in immigration proceedings and they have to be in the United States to finish their immigration proceedings, right? They're still not UEs. What they are arriving aliens. They are subject to removal and they are probably under a parole. That's why they're in the United States temporarily for the purpose of attending their immigration proceedings. They're not UE. It's very different. They have other problems, obviously. They've been arrested by CBP, but they're not the same as UEs.
So another situation, if I enter the US with a fake passport or visa, but the CBP still let me in, am I a UE?
No. So again, this is something that kind of happens, to certain people where they try to enter the United States with fraudulent documents. If you presented yourself to a CBP officer at an airport or a land border crossing, and you presented fake documents, and the CBP officer is fooled, they let you in even though you have fake documents. I mean, number one, you shouldn't do that, but number two, it still means that you got inspected. It still means that you went through a port of entry. A UE, like I said earlier, is someone who does not go through inspection, who enters the country not through a port of entry into the United States. So someone who does this, they have other problems. They have fraud problems for sure, which we talked about in another episode, but they're not UE. So a UE has a very specific problems and specific options that are available to them.
So if I am a EWI, can I still get status?
So yes, a lot of people are UE, and sometimes they think, oh, because I did it wrong, because I entered the border illegally, there's no chance for me. I just have to live with this and live in the United States under fear and without status forever. But there are options for UEs to get valid immigration status, and for some of them, they might even get a green card or lawful permanent resident status, but it depends on the circumstances.
So if I am a EWI and I can survive in the US, can I just choose not to have status?
So this is what I was kind of talking about, right? So for some people, they think, oh, you know, I can't, I don't have any options because I am a UE, or like they think, oh, I don't have to get status because I can survive. I can maybe, you know, work under the table. Maybe I can just, you know, still support my family. Maybe I can have a small business, and I'm just not going to get status. Well, again, what I was talking about earlier, there are consequences to being UE. As a UE, you're not authorized to be in the country, and you have to leave under the law, following the rules of the law. You're also at risk of being arrested for a federal crime or for deportation or for both. You have very limited ways of legally making an income. There are restrictions on employment. Employers can't hire you generally, and you're also ineligible for certain government benefits. You also can't bring family here, you can't vote, and you can't leave the country because you might not be able to return. So as much as someone might think, oh, UE is fine, I can survive, my family and I can survive, you should try to get status if there are options that are available to you.
Yes. So can a US citizen family member petition for me?
A family-based petition, is just something that establishes the familial relationship, right? We've talked about this before. The petition is not status. Now, the question really is, can you get a status through your U.S. citizen family member? And a U.S. citizen family member can petition for someone who's UE, but can they get a green card after that is a different question. You know, like for some people, they might be able to do consular processing. It all depends.
So if I am a EWI, can I adjust status to a family?
Generally, that's tough to do. Adjustment of status, we've talked about this in a previous episode, requires inspection and admission. Those are the terms in the adjustment of status law, meaning you have to have presented yourself for inspection at a port of entry, and a CBP officer should have admitted you, meaning let you in through the country. You were allowed to go in because you have a visa or something. That's really what adjustment is. You came in at a certain status, a certain visa status, and you're adjusting to LPR status. Now, if you are UE, obviously you didn't have a visa, you didn't go through inspection, there's nothing to adjust from to adjust to LPR status. So usually adjustment of status is not possibility for a lot of UEs, subject to certain exceptions.
How do I prove that I was inspected and I'm not a UE?
So for some people, this is something that they're concerned about. If they want to do adjustment of status, I need to prove that I was inspected and admitted. How do I do that? One of the best proofs of admission is your I-94. This is a document that previously was on paper. It's a small white card. Now it's available digitally through the CBP website, and it lists out when somebody entered the United States, what kind of visa they entered on, and when that visa is going to expire if it has an expiration date. That's one of the best ways to prove that someone was inspected and admitted into the country. Another is their passport. If they have stamps from CBP, that, when you go through international travel, immigration will stamp something on your passport saying, okay, we let this person in, this is the date that they were let in, and this is the visa status or the non-immigrant status that they were admitted into the country. So that's also good proof. Airline documentation might also help with this. So yeah, all those kinds of documents can prove that someone was inspected and admitted and is not a UE.
If I am a UE, can I still get a family-based green card by other way besides adjustment of status?
So because adjustment of status is going to be very difficult without being inspected or admitted, one option for UEs is consular processing and the I-601A process. We've talked about this in a previous episode, but as a reminder, if you are UE, you have unlawful presence, and the I-601A is a waiver for unlawful presence. It forgives someone's unlawful presence. So the I-601A is going to solve that. And consular processing, meaning getting your green card through the consulate, it doesn't have this inspection and admission requirement that adjustment of status has, because consular processing is not adjusting from one visa status to another. Consular processing is you're in your home country and you're coming in for the first time, or kind of the first time as an immigrant. So you don't have that inspection and admission requirement through consular processing. I-601A forgives the unlawful presence. So this is the option for someone who is a UE. Obviously, there are extra steps. You have to do the family-based petition, then you have to do the I-601A and get that approved, and then you have to go back to your home country to do consular processing. But it is possible. It's a straightforward path, and it's something that Wang Law Office has done for many clients before.
Yes. So can I get petitioned by an employer even if I am a EWI?
If you're a UE, you generally are not authorized to have any sort of employment. So legally, you can't be hired for an employer to be able to petition for you. And this is one of the reasons why you can't get employment-based green cards if you are a UE.
What about asylum? Can I get asylum if I'm a UE?
So asylum seekers are generally people who are fleeing really bad conditions in their home country. They're fleeing persecution, and these people generally don't have the time or the money or the resources to apply for a valid visa into the United States, to wait for a visa and to go through that process. So they come to the border, or they cross the border not at a port of entry, and a lot of our asylum seekers are UEs. And if you are an asylum seeker, being a UE is not going to prevent you from filing asylum. You can file asylum if you are a UE. And if you get approved for asylum, you might eventually be able to apply for a green card after a year.
So any other way for me to get a green card?
So we talked about asylum, and we've talked about I-601A and consular processing. Another way for someone who is a UE to get a green card is through cancellation of removal. Cancellation of removal is available for persons in removal proceedings who have been in the United States for more than 10 years and who have U.S. citizen or LPR family members who will suffer hardship if they're removed from the country. We've had a previous episode about this where we go in depth, but cancellation of removal just is another path for people who are UE. It's specifically for people who are UE. As long as you can prove that you've been in the country continuously for 10 years or more, and if you have family members who will suffer without you, then you can apply for cancellation or removal. And if it's approved, that's straight green card. That's automatically LPR status when it's approved.
What if I am not in the proceeding and I don't have a family?
Like I said, cancellation or removal, you have to be in proceedings and you need those family member hardships. If you don't have those two things, there are special visas that will allow you to get status and eventually get a green card. One of those is the T visa. The T visa is specifically for victims of alien smuggling. A lot of people who are UEs in the United States, they came in probably through human smuggling. There are groups of people who kind of exploit or kind of prey on the desperation of non-citizens who want to come into the United States. And so these people get smuggled in and are victimized in human smuggling and human trafficking operations. If someone is a victim of human smuggling, and if they help the authorities in investigating and prosecuting human smuggling, they could be eligible for a T visa, and that's a non-immigrant visa that has a pathway towards getting a green card.
So U visa is also an option too, right?
Yes, so U visa, which we love talking about on this show, is also a pathway for someone who is UE. It's very similar to the T visa because it's for victims of crimes, but U visa is more general. It's for crime victims of like a long list of qualifying crimes, not just human smuggling, which is what the T visa is for. If someone is a crime victim, a victim of one of the qualifying crimes under the U visa law, and if they helped investigate and prosecute the people who have victimized them, they may get a non-immigrant status, the U visa status, and that also has a pathway towards getting a green card after 3 years.
Yes. If you are a EV, then you might be at risk of arrest and deportation, both. And today we talk about lots of different ways to get status if you are a EV. So you should better to call in to make an appointment to consult to see if we can help you. Indeed, if you can get a legal status, you should always try it. And if you have more questions, feel free to leave your question to any of our platform.
Right. The UEs, they did something wrong or something that's not allowed under our laws. And some of them think, oh, because I did that, because I crossed the border illegally, there's no hope for me, or there are no options for me, or it's going to be really hard for me to do anything. If you or a family member was a UE, is a UE, there are options, and we've just talked about them. If you think you might qualify, you should explore them so that you can hopefully get legal status and have peace of mind for you and your family. But in any case, crossing the border illegally, again, that is a crime that is not authorized under our criminal statutes and our immigration statutes. We do not encourage that. You should not encourage that at all, okay? And as a final reminder, everything that I say here on this YouTube show is based on my legal opinion and based on my experience as an immigration lawyer. However, it is not legal advice. It is not advice specific to anyone's case, and it does not constitute representation. By viewing this or by listening to me, it doesn't mean that we represent you, that I represent you as a lawyer, or Ryan Law Office represents you. However, if you want legal advice specific to your case or your family's case, or if you want us to represent you as your lawyers, please feel free to reach out to us.
And please continue to follow us on YouTube. Thank you. See you next time.
Yeah, till next time. Bye.